Imagine you're driving down the highway and suddenly your car just completely dies.
Oh, the worst feeling.
Right. So you coast to the shoulder, you call a mechanic, and when they finally arrive, they don't even bother to pop the hood.
They just stand there.
Yeah, they just pull out a camera, take a static photograph of the engine block, and look at the picture and say, well, here's your problem. You've got a snapped belt.
I mean, sure, that tells you something is broken physically.
Exactly. But if you really want to know what actually went wrong, like why the belt snapped or why the engine overheated in the first place, a static photo isn't going to cut it.
No, definitely not.
You want to pop that hood while the engine is still sputtering, with smoke billowing out, and watch the failure happen in real time.
Right, because a static picture only really gives you the aftermath of the disaster.
Exactly.
To actually fix a complex system, you have
Yeah.
to watch the mechanism break down.
And that is exactly what we are doing today, but we're doing it for the human body. We're unlocking a whole new way for you to see your own biology.
It's a fascinating perspective.
It really is. So welcome to today's deep dive into pathophysiology. The mission for this deep dive is to explore exactly how normal bodily functions go wrong when disease strikes.
And honestly, it's one of the most empowering lenses you can look through as a patient.
How so?
Well, usually when we go to the doctor, we're just handed a label, right?
Mhm.
Like a name for our pain. But pathophysiology goes way deeper than that.
It gives you the actual script of what your cells are doing wrong.
Exactly.
So let's break down the word itself, because it's essentially a mashup of two distinct fields. You have pathology, which is the study of disease at the structural level.
Right, that's your static photograph of the broken engine.
Yeah, what your tissues and cells physically look like under a microscope. And then you have physiology, which is just the study of normal function.
The engine running smoothly, taking you safely down the highway.
Exactly. So pathophysiology sits right at the seam between the two.
It does. It doesn't just ask, what does this diseased tissue look like?
Yeah.
It asks, what is this diseased tissue actually doing?
Why is it producing this specific fever or, this shortness of breath?
Or that exact type of aching fatigue you're feeling right now.
It's popping the hood while the smoke is still pouring out.
That's a great way to put it. And the reason this distinction matters so much in modern medicine is that, well, historically, structure and mechanism were kind of lumped together.
Like if a liver looked diseased, it was diseased.
Right. But today, it's a much more nuanced debate. You could have two patients whose hearts look structurally identical on an MRI scan.
But they're having completely different issues.
Exactly. They're suffering from totally different functional breakdowns. One might have a heart that pumps weakly, while the other has a heart that pumps fine, but just fails to relax properly between beats.
Oh, wow. So the photograph looks perfectly fine, but the car is still stalling out in the intersection.
Yeah, that's the reality of it. And on the other end of the spectrum, molecular biology has pushed our understanding so deep, like down to the level of individual genes. So some scientists actually argue pathophysiology is just dissolving into molecular pathology.
But there's a counter-argument to that, isn't there?
Definitely. The counter-argument is that a single gene mutation doesn't fully explain the lived experience of a patient, gasping for air.
You have to step back and look at the whole integrated story of the body.
Exactly. You can't just stare at a faulty spark plug and understand why the entire transmission is locking up.
I completely buy that. But I really want to trace how we got this perspective in the first place.
Well, the history is wild.
Because for thousands of years, if you got sick, it was viewed as like a curse or bad air or some mysterious imbalance.
Right.
How did we get to this incredibly precise, measurable science of bodily breakdowns?
Well, we have to look at the ghosts it replaced. For a very long time, medicine was entirely dominated by ancient humoral theory.
This goes back to Hippocrates and Galen, right?
Yes, the four humors.
Blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile.
That's the one. For centuries, if you were sick, the medical consensus was simply that your humors were out of balance.
So if you had a fever, they thought you had too much blood.
Yep, so they'd bleed you. It was this abstract whole-body theory without any localized mechanism at all.
Just, hey, you're sick because there's too much black bile floating around in there somewhere.
Basically, yeah. And it wasn't until 1761 that medicine got its first real geographical anchor.
What happened in 1761?
An Italian anatomist named Giovanni Battista Morgagni published this massive textbook. He actually correlated the symptoms his patients had while they were alive with the specific lesions he found on their organs during autopsies.
Oh, so he's the guy who finally said, The disease isn't some mystical vapor in your blood. It's actually living right here in this specific damaged lung.
Exactly. He fundamentally invented pathology as an organ-based science.
Wow.
But the real shift toward mechanism happened about a century later in 1858 with Rudolf Virchow.
The father of modern pathology.
Right. Virchow took Morgani's idea and zoomed in 1,000 times closer. He pushed the seat of disease from the organ down to the cell.
Let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around this.
Sure.
If Morgani said it's the organs, Virchow is basically saying the organ isn't a single thing. It's a city made of cells.
I like that analogy.
And a disease isn't some foreign invader burning the city down. It's just the normal citizen cells doing their everyday jobs, but suddenly doing them abnormally.
That is a perfect way to conceptualize it. His famous phrase was, omnis cellula e cellula. Every cell comes from a cell.
Okay, so it's a functional claim. The cells are misbehaving.
Right. And right around that same time, a French physiologist named Claude Bernard was developing this really beautiful concept of the milieu intérieur, or the internal environment.
What did he mean by that?
He realized the body actively regulates its internal chemistry, like your blood sugar, your core temperature, your blood pH.
So it stays perfectly stable whether you're walking through a blizzard or sitting in a sauna.
Exactly.
We're talking about homeostasis here, aren't we?
We are indeed. The actual term homeostasis was coined a bit later, in the 1920s or 30s, by an American physiologist named Walter Cannon.
Okay, so bringing it all together.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, homeostasis is the absolute conceptual backbone of pathophysiology.
Because health is simply the successful defense of that stable internal environment.
Yes. Therefore, disease is simply the story of homeostasis failing, being overwhelmed, or being violently reset to a new, harmful normal.
That is such a massive upgrade from guessing about phlegm.
It really is.
You have Morgani pointing at the organ, Virchow zooming in on the misbehaving cells, and Cannon tying it all together with the failure of homeostasis.
It's the framework that builds all of modern medicine. The body is just a set of interlocking regulatory systems.
And disease is what happens when one of those systems is pushed past its breaking point.
Exactly.
So if that's the blueprint of health, I really want to see what happens when someone throws a wrench in the gears. Let's look at how that failure actually cascades inside the human body.
We have some great examples for that.
Yeah, the sources give a fascinating example of a microscopic error causing just catastrophic systemic failure, sickle cell disease.
Oh, sickle cell is the ultimate example of a clean, highly localized typo.
The history behind discovering it is pretty wild, too. Back in 1910, a physician named James Herrick first noticed these bizarre crescent moon-shaped red blood cells under a microscope.
But nobody knew why they looked like that for decades.
Right. Not until 1949 when a chemist named Linus Pauling proved it was a molecular disease.
He ran defective hemoglobin, which is the protein in your blood that ferries oxygen around through an electric field.
And he saw it move differently than normal hemoglobin.
Yes. And today, we know the exact genetic typo causing that difference. It is one single DNA base change.
One letter. That's it.
That's it. We should probably explain what that typo actually does.
Yeah, let's break it down.
So your hemoglobin is made up of protein building blocks, including something called the beta-globin chain. This one tiny genetic mutation swaps out a single amino acid. Specifically, glutamic acid is replaced by valine at position 6 of that beta-globin chain.
It's literally just one swapped word in a massive instruction manual.
But the consequences of that one wrong word are profound. Under low oxygen conditions, that single amino acid swap causes the hemoglobin molecules to actually stick together.
They clump up.
Worse than clumping. They form these long, rigid rods inside the red blood cell, and that physically stretches the cell out of its normal round shape into a stiff sickle or crescent shape.
Oh, wow. And if you've ever wondered why that causes so much pain, it's basically a microscopic traffic jam, right?
That's exactly what it is.
Normal red blood cells are flexible. They squeeze through your tiny capillaries easily. But these rigid, sickle-shaped cells get stuck.
They jam up the blood vessels entirely, cutting off oxygen to tissues and organs.
If you've ever felt the deep, intense ache of a muscle cramping from lack of oxygen, imagine that happening deep inside your actual organs.
Right, that's what's known as a vaso-occlusive pain crisis. It's pathophysiology at its cleanest. One typo rewrites the entire physical structure of the cell.
It draws a direct line from a molecular defect to a whole body symptom.
It really does.
But wait, I have a question about this. If this single mutation is so overwhelmingly destructive, why hasn't human evolution wiped it out over thousands of years?
That is a great question.
Is a mutation like this always purely a negative disease, or is there some kind of biological catch?
That brings up one of the most fascinating nuances in human biology. That exact same genetic defect persists at very high frequencies in certain parts of the world,
Which parts?
specifically in regions with high rates of malaria.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The reason is that if you carry just one copy of that mutated gene, meaning you have the sickle cell trait, but not the full-blown disease, it actually alters your red blood cells just enough to make it very difficult for the malaria parasite to survive inside them.
That's incredible. So the exact same molecular mechanism that acts as a crippling disease in one context is a literal life-saving evolutionary shield in another context.
Yep. It completely complicates our binary view of what a disease even is. Context is everything.
Okay, so sickle cell shows us a structural traffic jam, but what about a chemical breakdown?
What do you mean?
Like a situation where the cells aren't physically blocking anything, but the whole communication system just collapses.
Ah, I see.
The sources highlight diabetic ketoacidosis, or DKA, to illustrate this.
DKA is an absolute masterclass in systems-level failure.
Where does it start?
It usually occurs in type 1 diabetes, where the pancreas just completely stops producing insulin.
And insulin is the key, right?
Exactly. Without insulin, your cells have no way to unlock their doors and pull glucose, which is sugar, out of your bloodstream to use for energy.
I always think of this like a person starving to death in the middle of a fully stocked grocery store.
Oh, that's a brilliant analogy.
The food is right there in the aisles, the glucose in the blood, but the cells just don't have the keys to open any of the packages.
That's a remarkably accurate way to picture it. Your blood sugar levels could be sky high, like over 250 milligrams per deciliter.
But the cells are still starving.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the glucose can't get inside, your cells are sending out desperate emergency signals to your brain saying, we are starving here.
So what does the body do?
To survive, your body initiates a backup plan. It starts rapidly breaking down fat for fuel.
Which honestly sounds like a pretty solid backup plan.
It works for a short time, but there's a severe mechanical consequence to doing that.
Which is?
When the liver breaks down those fats, it converts them into something called ketone bodies. The problem is, ketone bodies are highly acidic.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah, as they flood into the bloodstream, they start dragging the pH of your blood down.
And blood needs to stay pretty tightly regulated, right?
Very tightly. Normal human blood is strictly regulated between a pH of 7.35 and 7.45. But in severe DKA, it can plummet below 7.2. This is a state called metabolic acidosis, and it basically starts shutting down cellular function across the entire body.
And while your blood is slowly turning acidic, you still have all that unusable sugar floating around.
Right.
What happens to that?
Your kidneys step in and try to filter it out. But there's so much glucose spilling into your urine that it triggers a physical process called osmosis.
Meaning?
The high concentration of sugar in the urine literally pulls massive amounts of water out of your bloodstream to try and dilute it.
So you start urinating frequently, losing huge volumes of fluid.
Exactly.
So you're becoming severely dehydrated at the exact same time your blood is becoming highly acidic.
Right.
Which means that acid is just getting more and more concentrated as you lose water.
It's homeostasis in a total death spiral. You have a metabolic failure creating acid, a renal failure dumping water, and an acid-base balance completely wrecked.
So you cannot treat DKA by just looking at the pancreas?
Not at all. You have to understand how all these interconnected systems are crashing into each other.
That makes total sense. Now, we've just walked through two examples where pathophysiology perfectly explains the disease. But I want to pivot to the danger zone.
The danger zone.
Yeah. What happens when our understanding of the mechanism is confidently disastrously wrong? Because the history of medicine is littered with things we were absolutely certain about until someone finally proved we weren't.
Very true. The peptic ulcer paradigm shift is probably the classic example of this.
Oh, I remember this one. For most of the 20th century, doctors would look you in the eye and confidently declare that your stomach ulcers were caused by stress, worrying too much, and eating spicy food.
And it sounded perfectly logical to everyone at the time.
Right. The pathophysiological story was that your stomach was just producing too much acid because of stress and eating its own lining.
It made intuitive sense based on the knowledge they had. But then in 1982, two Australian physicians, Barry Marshall and Robin Warren, were looking at stomach biopsy samples.
And they found something else?
They kept finding a spiral-shaped bacterium, later named H. pylori, living right there in the ulcerated tissue.
And they proposed that it was the bacteria, not the stress, causing the ulcers.
Yes, and the medical establishment essentially laughed them out of the room.
Because the dogma was that the stomach was completely sterile, right? Like, no bacteria could possibly survive in a vat of hydrochloric acid.
Exactly. It was considered scientific heresy to suggest otherwise.
So in 1984, unable to get his peers to listen, Barry Marshall did something crazy. He took a beaker of cloudy meat broth teeming with H. pylori from an infected patient, and he just drank it.
He bypassed the entire medical consensus and used his own gut to test the mechanism.
Which is just wild to think about. And it worked.
It did. Within days, he was vomiting, suffering severe gastritis, and his biopsies showed his stomach was inflamed and colonized by the bacteria.
He proved the mechanism, overturned decades of entrenched medical dogma, and eventually he and Warren shared the 2005 Nobel Prize for it.
This is an amazing story.
It is, but it proves that a mechanism isn't true just because a bunch of really smart people agree it sounds logical. It's only true if you can prove it's physically happening.
And that actually leads to a much darker realization.
What's that?
If the medical community can be that stubbornly wrong about something as simple as stomach bacteria, we really have to recognize how this authoritative, scientific-sounding language of mechanism can be misused.
Oh, absolutely. The source material points to an 1851 text detailing a supposed diagnosis called drapetomania.
Yeah, and this is a completely fabricated disease.
Completely fake.
It was invented by an American physician named Samuel Cartwright. Looking at the historical context, Cartwright used the biological language at the time to frame the desire of enslaved people to escape captivity as a literal mental disease.
He even proposed physiological causes and medical treatments for it, didn't he?
He did. It's a horrifying piece of history.
But as the source material highlights, it serves as a stark reminder that just because someone puts an idea into the clinical language of pathology doesn't make it scientifically true.
No, it doesn't. Cartwright weaponized the language of medicine to pathologize a completely normal, rational human desire for freedom in the face of brutal injustice.
It really shows how biological frameworks can be constructed to serve societal or power structures rather than objective science.
Precisely. And while that's an extreme historical example, the sources bring this concept of questioning accepted paradigms right into the modern era.
By looking at the chemical imbalance theory of depression, right?
Exactly.
That narrative was everywhere in the 90s and 2000s. The idea that depression is simply caused by having low serotonin levels in the brain.
It became deeply, deeply embedded in public understanding, largely driven by drug marketing at the time.
But what does the actual clinical literature say?
Relying on the clinical literature cited in our sources, they point to a major 2022 umbrella review led by a psychiatrist named Joanna Moncrief.
Okay.
Her team analyzed decades of prior systematic studies on serotonin and depression.
And what did they find?
They found no consistent evidence that depression is caused by lower serotonin activity or concentration in the brain.
Wow. Now, I know the sources are very careful to note this doesn't mean antidepressants don't help people.
Right. That's a crucial point.
Yeah.
Many patients find significant relief from them. The medication can still be highly useful.
But the review serves as a modern cautionary tale about mechanism.
Exactly. It shows how a simplified pathophysiological narrative, the idea that you just have a chemical imbalance that needs topping up, can completely outrun the actual scientific evidence base.
And just stay locked in the public consciousness for decades.
Yep.
You know, the realization that these deeply held paradigms can be flawed really forces us to examine the other misconceptions we carry around about our health.
There are quite a few of them.
Let's clear up some of the confusing terminology you always hear in a doctor's office, like etiology, pathogenesis, pathophysiology. I hear these used interchangeably all the time, but they aren't the same thing, are they?
They aren't at all. And you can really think of them as a timeline of a disaster.
Okay, give me an analogy.
Let's use the analogy as a house fire.
All right.
The etiology is the specific cause of the fire, like the arsonist actually striking the match.
Got it.
The pathogenesis is the narrative story of the fire spreading. First, the curtains catch, which spreads to the couch, which engulfs the roof.
Okay, so etiology is the match, pathogenesis is the spreading fire. Where does pathophysiology fit into that?
Pathophysiology is the precise chemical and physical reaction of the wood actually combusting at each step along the way. It's the mechanics of how the heat breaks down the molecular structure of the wall.
That makes so much more sense. Okay, what about the single cause myth? I feel like as patients, we always want to point to one single match that started the fire.
Unfortunately, human biology is rarely that simple. Many diseases require multiple sequential hits to the system before the fire really starts.
The sources mention the two-hit hypothesis for this, right?
Yes, developed in 1971 by geneticist Alfred Knudsen. He was studying a childhood eye cancer called retinoblastoma.
And what did he figure out?
He realized that cancer often requires damage to both copies of a crucial tumor suppressor gene.
So one hit isn't enough.
Inheriting one mutated gene isn't enough, no. You need a second, spontaneous mutation later on. The disease is a multi-step process, not just a single event.
Okay, another massive misconception is the idea that your symptoms always match the underlying mechanism.
Oh, this is a big one.
We tend to think, well, if I feel terrible, my body must be horribly broken, and if I feel fine, I must be completely healthy.
That is a very dangerous assumption.
Yeah.
Pathophysiology operates independently of your subjective feeling.
Do you have an example?
A perfect example is a silent myocardial infarction, a silent heart attack.
You can have a heart attack and not feel it.
Yes, you can have severe tissue damage to the myocardium, the actual muscle of the heart, due to a blocked artery, and experience absolutely no chest pain or shortness of breath.
That's terrifying.
The symptoms are what you feel. Pathophysiology is the objective reality underneath, and they frequently do not align.
Which brings me to the misconception that I find most fascinating out of all of this. The illusion of normal.
Yeah.
In 2017, the medical guidelines for blood pressure changed, right?
We did. The American College of Cardiology and the American Heart Association jointly decided to lower the threshold for diagnosing high blood pressure or hypertension.
The cutoff went from 140/90 down to 130/80.
Exactly.
So millions of people went to sleep on a Tuesday perfectly healthy and woke up on a Wednesday with a disease.
Yes.
But literally nothing inside their blood vessels had changed overnight.
It raises a very philosophical but highly practical question. Are our diagnostic cutoffs reflecting real natural boundaries in biology? Or are they just human-drawn statistical lines placed over a messy, continuous spectrum of human variation?
It really feels like we just draw a line in the sand so doctors have a standardized point to write a prescription.
It definitely functions that way a lot of the time.
And speaking of prescriptions, why does all of this granular detail matter to you, the listener, right now? Like, it's not just trivia for a medical exam.
No, it's the engine of modern healthcare. Without a deeper understanding of pathophysiology, drug design is basically blind trial and error.
But because we mapped out the mechanisms, we can intervene precisely.
Take the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system.
That's a mouthful.
It is. It's a complex hormonal pathway your kidneys use to regulate blood pressure. But because scientists understood that specific pathway, they could rationally design ACE inhibitors.
And for anyone who doesn't know, ACE stands for angiotensin-converting enzyme.
Right. And an ACE inhibitor is a drug that specifically blocks that enzyme, stopping the production of a chemical messenger that normally tells your blood vessels to tighten up.
So by interrupting that one specific gear in the machine, the blood vessels stay relaxed and your blood pressure drops.
Exactly. It's targeted intervention.
And we actually all watched this play out on a global scale with COVID-19, didn't we?
We absolutely did. In the earliest days of the pandemic, the virus was treated strictly as a severe respiratory infection, like a really bad pneumonia.
Because that's what it looked like on the surface.
But within months, as doctors popped the hood, our pathophysiological understanding evolved incredibly rapidly.
They realized it wasn't just in the lungs.
Right. They identified the cytokine storm. The immune system essentially panics, flooding the body with inflammatory signals called cytokines.
And instead of just fighting the virus, this immune storm starts attacking the patient's own healthy blood vessels.
Yes, causing them to leak and form microscopic blood clots throughout the entire body.
And once we understood how the damage was happening, the treatments changed completely.
Completely.
We pivoted from just putting everyone on ventilators to using powerful anti-inflammatory drugs like dexamethasone to calm the immune system.
And blood thinners to stop the clotting. Understanding the actual mechanism, the pathophysiology literally saved lives in real time. When a public health official explains why a virus acts a certain way, or your doctor explains why a specific pill works, they are literally translating pathophysiology into your everyday decision-making.
So what does this all mean for you? Let's bring this home.
It's about empowerment.
Exactly. Understanding pathophysiology means you are no longer just memorizing a list of symptoms or blindly accepting a diagnostic label. You are understanding the why and the how of your own biology.
It means the next time you're sitting in a clinic, You are empowered to ask your doctor for the mechanistic evidence.
You can say, I hear the diagnosis, but how is this actually working inside my body?
It shifts the entire dynamic. You transition from being a passive recipient of a medical label to an active participant in your own health. You are finally looking under the hood of your own engine.
I love that. But I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over today, building on everything we've uncovered in this deep dive.
Let's hear it.
We've talked about how diagnostic lines like those blood pressure thresholds are often just human-made statistical constructs that can move overnight.
Right.
And we've seen how a genetic condition, like the sickle cell trait, can be a crippling disease in one zip code, but a life-saving evolutionary advantage in another.
It all depends on context.
So if what is normal keeps shifting based on guidelines and what is considered a disease depends entirely on the environment, will the future of medicine eventually have to abandon this binary idea of normal versus abnormal altogether?
That's a huge question.
Will we have to stop comparing ourselves to a statistical average and instead start treating every single human body as its own unique, constantly shifting ecosystem?
It really makes you reconsider what health even means.
It's definitely something to think about the next time you pop the hood. Thanks for diving deep with us today. Keep asking questions, and we'll catch you on the next one.